Hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together on a weekly basis and tackle the things in the world of football and/or soccer that we thought were interesting. Smooth as silk. I'm Tom Rennie. Alongside me for today's program is my fellow Sirius XMFC presenter, but also star of all your televisions over the last week or so with the US men's national team in action. In a win, hooray! And a loss, boo. It is Brian Dunny Dunseth. Hi, Dunny. You all right?
I'm good. I just realized how unprofessional I am having gum in my mouth as I was talking to you. I've had the weirdest couple of days. So right before we leave to go down to Austin, I took the family with me to just get away. It's fall break. And my tooth broke. Like
What?
legit. I was laying on the couch. I had a chip in my hand. I grabbed one chip. I just want that salty little taste after dinner.
You need it.
Right before you go. My tooth broke. Like so I had all my fillings, like I've got fillings, bad, like strong teeth, really weak teeth. Never had braces, but really weak teeth.
Oh.
So I replaced the fillings on this side. I was just lazy, didn't do it. So literally I take a bite of my chip and I was like, like when you chew something, you take like your teeth hit something, you're like, oh, that
Yeah.
shouldn't be in your mouth.
That's wrong.
It was my fucking tooth. Sorry, Tim. And I pull it out. And it's like it was like.
So
when
which
your
one? One of the
kid-
backies? One of the
back left.
What do you call
molar,
these?
Molar. Back
Molars.
left
It's a
molar.
molar.
So on the inside, it just broke off.
Oh, no.
And I was like, it was like when a child loses a baby tooth. Like that's the size of it. And I'm
Before
like,
you were due on like national TV. Like how
leaving
many
the
more
next-
days?
leaving
Oh,
the next day. Leaving the next day.
that is so
So
stressful.
I'm in full panic mode. Like everybody else is asleep. I'm on the couch. I pop up, I run to the bathroom. I'm like trying to see where it is. And I'm like cursing myself because I was like, I should have got all the fillings out and we put the clear fillings in, blah, blah, blah. So I just told my wife, I told Jade, I was like, hey, can you make me an appointment? Anyways, neither here nor there. Thank God the filling is still in there because I'm like root canal, pull them, cap them, pain, nerve endings exposed. Specta, no problem whatsoever. So I was just like,
Did you manage to
I
get
still
this
haven't
done
got to the
before?
dentist.
So you still haven't gone. You've
No.
just sort of like
Chewed more with my right
you
hand
battled
side.
through it for the last few days. So
I-
you're
I
on
did-
national TV for like
Yeah.
2 full like broadcast days or whatever.
Yeah.
With
Broken
like
back tooth.
broken back tooth. This is the kind of, people say, oh, broadcasters, they don't really do the hard yards. They're not the same as people who dig ditches and build roads and bridges and whatnot. The real work that keeps this economy flowing. I say Brian Dunseth went on national TV with his face hanging off. And you didn't notice, did you? You were thinking, wow, that man looks impossibly young. And who let this teenager in here? You weren't thinking that man's in savage pain. Well done. Well done,
No
you.
pain.
No pain.
No. So you have those little
Stunning.
floss sticks. You know the floss sticks? And like I went like very gently around to like floss in between just to see like if it was like how broken it was. And I was okay. Like
Okay.
it was wild. But now I'm having these
Goodness.
crazy dreams where like my teeth are falling out.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, like,
chewing your own teeth every night.
Yeah,
I
it's
get that.
not no bueno, someone would say. No bueno.
No, it's no good.
But I'm good.
And
How are
it's-
you?
It's literally happening to you as well, which is not great.
Yeah.
I'm really good. Apart from the fact, so it's international break, and look, I could work. I could chase work up, but I actually decided, and I've decided a lot over the years to try and take this time off, as a lot of people kind of with my schedule do. But I did a bad thing.
Oh,
Did a bad thing, which we'll do on topic 2 today. We're not going to do like a full heroes and villains thing today because we're going to do 2 topics. One is the US men, which we'll get to. Danny's been on tour with them, so I want to hear all about it. The other one is England hiring a German manager. And I made a mistake. My mistake was I thought Twitter was still old Twitter and not new Twitter.
I saw you.
So I made the mistake. So I've had a few days off. So I had a long weekend. I worked one day, then I had a couple more days off, and here we are. And I had my son on a Tuesday. He's 2 years old, and he is like all boys. You've got boys. They're fucking nuts. Sorry, Tim. And so I take him to the park at like 9, and we're still out at like midday. And it's fun for him. We're having a good time, but I'm also a bit bored. I'm a little bit bored. So I took on
You
the
like
Twitter.
to poke. You like to poke.
Yeah, and I used to do it a lot on Twitter because it was fun, and now it's become a bit death threaty and not fun. And it was always a bit like that, but now the guardrails are like off since that moron bought the whole thing. And so I did something about like Thomas Tuchel. And, I have a long-held belief, which we'll discuss later in the program, that I think that the players and the manager should adhere to the same rules when it comes to playing for a national team, right?
Oh, your mentions are significant.
I had a tweet that was just like, I just think you shouldn't hire a foreign manager to a national team. 300 300,000 impressions and growing and growing and growing and growing.
315,000.3 as
And
we're
it
speaking right now.
and it just did not stop. I've had to turn the notifications off. And it's some supportive, a lot negative, some extreme negativity. Like, I'm not Nigel Farage. I'm not like xenophobic or whatever. I just have some views on national team football, whatever. But it went buck wild on me. And yeah, that was the rest of my day. I was
Oh,
bored. And so I
yeah.
did something. And now I really kind of regret it, to
They
be
they
honest.
they they went through your tweets too.
Yeah,
They're
hard.
subtweeting you.
Hardcore.
Yeah. Oh my
Hardcore
gosh.
Serena Wiegman tweets that, that
Yes.
I was happy that England won the Euros, the women, and we've got a Dutch manager, which again, it's I can have two thoughts in my head at the same time. I was really happy that happened, but I do sort of think that the manager should be the same nationality as the players.
Yeah.
But then in some circumstances where you've got emerging nations or whatever, I would give some leeway. It's a position of some subtlety.
This is amazing.
But
I'm
not
just
on
scrolling
Twitter.
through all the mentions.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, buddy.
Wild. Wild. Anyway, we'll get to that. So, like, don't.
Even the Americans don't like you.
No.
Well, it looks like the Aston Villa fans, at least that section of the country, seems to agree with you.
Yes. And also, I have learned a valuable lesson. Well, it's from old Twitter, but never reply or retweet like negative stuff, but you can screenshot and post, which is why the whole unblocking thing is a terrible, terrible thing. So repost your friends and screenshot your enemies. I'd always recommend that to people. Anyway, look, we'll get to that in a second today.
Congrats. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And I just thought, that's why I don't do this anymore. That's why I stopped doing this.
That's why I quit. That's why I'm 2 years now. 2 years. Yeah.
Do you know what? As and when I leave this profession, I will quit like on day one. But until then, it just, well, I'm addicted to it still, obviously. But I do still find it, even in its current terrible form, quite useful. Anyway, we'll get to all that. Mauricio Pochettino, manager of the US men's national team. You have been on tour with the national team for the last couple of games, working on TV, covering the matches. Give us an overall view, an overall impression of your experiences. Because, of course, the games, they weren't the same, were they, in many ways?
Yeah. Really, really impressed. Really, really impressed. So we had the opportunity to go down to training, and obviously we go to the pressers and we can hang out and do all the fun stuff, and be able to see a version of the U.S. men's national team training that isn't visible to those on the outside, even to the media members, because we're part of the broadcast team. So we're given kind of a little bit more extreme access to the group, and we watch warm up. Usually it's like that 15-minute window. After warm-ups are done, team goes to the field, and then everyone's okay, you guys got to leave. So because TNT and Turner, Warner Brothers, WB, whatever we're calling ourselves, we can stay. And watching his staff, and his staff is Sebastian, his son Pochettino, kind of runs. He and Silvia Vinas kind of run everything. That's going to be like the warm up, methodical data, all that stuff. And then Jesus Perez is his like side by side. He's the one that's always around him, kind of the shorter Spanish coach that's been with him forever. Then you have Miki D'Agostino that's with him, and then Tony Jimenez is the Spanish goalkeeper, and that's his crew, that's his group. So there's still some remnants of the U.S. men's national team staff that is there, and so what we watched was what I wanted to see was like body language, right? Like I wanted to see like how the players, because Tim Ream had come out and he talked about a 2-hour training session, and that gets lost, I think, in the mumbo jumbo of social, because it gets picked apart and it's like, oh, you've never had a 2-hour training session. But it's more when you go on international duty and you're making these type of flights and the players are coming over from Europe, and you start with the guys that are more MLS based or guys that haven't been playing a lot. But then you integrate slowly the guys that are recovering. Some played on Saturday, like Christian Pulisic played on Sunday. So he's going to be a shorter amount of time on the field than maybe some of the others. But it was the intensity. It was the focus. It was like the barking. It was the yelling, from Tony Jimenez and the goalkeepers, like pounding down exactly what he wanted, even like positioning with the footwork from playing out of the back in small sided games, to Jesus working with the team in the small side, and working with guys, with Miki D'Agostino working with the guys that weren't going to be the starters. The intensity, like the 5v5 small side, even going over set pieces, everything. It was hard. It was quick. It was fast. It was aggressive. The sounds and the barking were aggressive. And then for Mauricio, he had the starting 11 team, and they were kind of like on the opposite side of like where the small side was happening. And you could just see the setup, and there were twists that we were seeing. And it had to do with the way they were defending. And he kind of insinuated this, how he wanted to defend with a hybrid of a 4-2-3-1, but the build out in possession was going to be 3 out of the back. But you could see what he was like. These are going to be like my 5 things that I like want from you. This is what I expect from you. This is what I demand from you. And he would like the movement and the shape and how he would ask the players, okay, the ball turns over, bam, guys are running. Okay, we're this, bam. And then you could see these little minute details that I was like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to be excited about seeing. So then after training, he has to go do media. Then they eat as a team. And then he invites us in to sit with him. And so they're finishing up their meal. He's like, hey, why don't you guys go get a meal? There's like probably 7 or 8 of us. We go eat, and then we're sitting down. And then when everybody's done eating, plates are cleared. We put all our dishes to the side and clean up our area. He comes over and he goes, okay, so this, I don't normally do this. So since this is like introductory, he's like, I want to push the tables together. This will be my staff. This will be your group. And then we'll just talk. So literally, he and his coaches push the tables together. We're like sitting on our side, thinking he's just going to sit there. Tables get pushed together. It's like a family style, like sit down. And we spent an hour, I would say at least an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, just like talking. And it was great. Like he was like, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? So we went around the room and introduced ourselves. And then he's like, now we'll introduce ourselves.
It's like
and
preschool.
Like,
he preschooled
no,
you.
It was,
like
but it was cool.
Reporters.
It was cool because like he didn't obviously know all of us. And this was like the first time, like trying to understand, okay, this is our media, American and media members that are going to be covering us for the better part of, then up until the World Cup, we have the coverage. So we have November window, January window, going all the way through. And then the tournaments will be covered by, you'll have CBS covering tournaments, Paramount Plus, you'll have Fox Soccer, FS1. So really impressed with the way, obviously, he likes to ramble on and verbalize what he thinks. He's a talker. Now looking back, there were things that he said that gives more insight to some of the decision making that happened between the Panama game and the Mexico game. And specific to the Panama game, listen, the reality is what? I had it down here. Tyler Adams, Gio Reyna, Johnny Cardoso, Luca De La Torre, Flo Balogun, Serginho Dest, Tim Weah, unavailable, not even to get called in. Then on top of that, you had Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Marlon Fossey, who would have been right back in these 2 games. And then Ricardo Pepi goes home after getting his goal. He got hit in the face, and we're still not sure if it was a knock, if it was something having to do with the ball being cleared off his face, but neither here nor there.
Yeah.
2 very different games. Panama game, full control, looked good, not completely perfect, but some really good things, particularly the build out of the back. It was a flat 3 build out with Anthony Robinson all the way up on the left. You had Yunus Musa on the right, talking about recovering his confidence, and that's what we saw. He looked great in that first game. You know me, I'm an Aiden Morris stan, Columbus Crew, now Middlesbrough.
I think a lot of people are now.
He and Gianluca Busio were very, very good. Mark McKenzie was solid in the first game. He picked up a little bit of a groin issue in the warm-up. The short turnaround time, the players leaving, and then the field at Estadio Akron in Guadalajara wasn't great. It was super heavy. I think they have an issue with like the top of their stadium is one of those like pitched roofs that are disconnected. So it's almost like a halo. I think they have like sunlight issues. So the surface, it was built for turf. Now it's grass, very heavy sand. Mark McKenzie had a little bit of a groin issue, so they didn't risk him. I thought the game against Mexico, they had their full squad. They looked great. Raul Jimenez, I said during halftime, looked like OG Ronaldo. I thought he was outstanding. Edson Alvarez was really strong, destructive in the midfield. Andres Guardado, El Principito, the Little Prince, that was his final game playing for Mexico. First 20 minutes. He came off in the 18th minute. His number is 18, 182 caps. He was a big thorn in the side of the U.S. team for a long, long time. That was the performance that Mexico needed to alleviate some of the pressure for Vasco Aguirre and Rafa Marquez, and to take some of the, I guess, the verbal barrage that the Mexican players get from the media members, ex-players, and the fan base. That was the performance they needed. For the United States, it was very clear that when you take this top 8 starting group out of the equation and potentially 10 or 12, depending upon where you see guys like Luca De La Torre, Johnny. Obviously, Chris Richards wasn't a part of that mix as well. Even a Marlon Fossey. Maybe I think it's pretty evident now that when we play established teams, not and no disrespect, like the Uzbekistans or the Omans or the New Zealands, that when you
Top 30
play
teams in the world.
when you
There's
play
a
a
ranking
Canada,
system. Yeah.
well, even in the region, if you play a Canada, if you play a Mexico,
Yeah.
you take away our top crew, our depth isn't as strong as we think it is. So I would say Matt Turner getting that shutout was important for him. He's still got to figure out his domestic football. Mark McKenzie looked good. Tim Ream is still going to start every game until someone can
Do you think?
supplant him. Yeah, because we talk about his age, but the left foot and everything that he does in the build out, he does something that nobody else can do. Anthony Robinson, I could see Anthony Robinson being the captain of this team.
Oh.
I think Aiden Morris is when the full team is together. Aiden Morris is going to be the player, in my humble opinion, that can replicate what Tyler Adams does. Not the same, but can replicate some of the intangibles. And then ultimately, I think the number 9 position is still completely up for grabs now that Flo Balogun is out for 2 months with a dislocated shoulder. Josh Sargent hasn't proved.
Yeah.
It's his first 2 starts since Iran at the World Cup. He hasn't proved. He does it for Norwich City. I think it's 17 goals in 2024. Something's just not clicking with the U.S. men's national team. I'd like to see him maybe get a start with the full team as opposed to being a substitute. I'd say the same with Ricardo Pepi. Brandon Vasquez is a different player profile. He plays his club football in Monterrey down in Mexico. Maybe that looks different. I think Alex Sendejas looks pretty good. The Club America, a Mexican American. So those would be kind of like broad stroke, the things I liked. I think for Mauricio Pochettino, the best thing that could have possibly happened did happen. And that was for him to get him and his staff to have the most ideal look at the guys that he called into camp, that he was familiar with, but now he like really knows what they're capable of doing versus playing in a game that's like, yeah, it's New Zealand and we win and it's 4-0 and everybody looks great. I think I'd rather him learn when we don't look great as opposed to maybe reinforce when we do play great, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, a few questions on this I've got for you. Maybe 3 things I'd like to cover before we kind of run out of time here. And the first one is players that maybe played themselves out of contention, because your point is absolutely valid that there's like 5 or 6 guaranteed starters when we get round to the World Cup, injury dependent, form dependent, but you can kind of pick out who those players are. There's 1 or 2 others you think, yeah, they've got a good chance. They're developing. I like them. And there's not a great deal of sort of spots available, but, centre forward certainly is one of them. I just wonder whether some of these additional guys that have come in here, Josh Sargent's the one you mentioned there that seems the most obvious. The miss against Panama was poor, but again, it's a one-off moment in a one-off game. A lot of eyes on him at that moment. So it's a bat. You could see his face afterwards. He knew what a big moment that could have been. First go under Poch and then he kind of fluffed his chance. Are there players where you think to yourself, yeah, they had a good little, we got David Nugent we had over here that got 1 cap. And Joey Barton got 1 cap. And again, I'm not disrespecting 1 cap. 1 cap is good. A friend of mine, Matt Jarvis, has got 2 caps for England. I would not discredit that. But, it's not 50 caps, 80 caps, a significant place in the structure of the national team. Anyone that kind of fell below that bar in the first couple of games?
Well, I can. How about this? I'll list out players that I think are. I don't know if saying they're in trouble is the right way to say it, but
got to get better.
Well, that they're going to have to do something pretty extraordinary in their domestic football to continue to justify being in this group. Because right now, all bets are off. Right? It's a cattle call, effectively, for national team players that deserve to be there. So I would say Ethan Horvath is a player that needs to figure it out. Zach Steffen got called in, but he picked up a knock. Colorado Rapids goalkeeper. He's been good, but statistically not anywhere near the best of MLS. Austin Trusty. I can't. I'm not sure what to make of him. I'm Glasgow Celtic is a massive club, but are you going to get the same type of games that you would have gotten in the championship? And I think bleeding out in the championship might have been more important. But what do I know?
That walloping in the Champions League wouldn't have helped him at all.
The Borussia Dortmund game, yeah. I'm still trying to figure out Christopher Lund, who plays his football at Palermo. He's, as of right now, kind of the, I guess, second left back ish behind Anthony Robinson. Joe Scally, I, I'm I'm I what he does for Borussia Mönchengladbach is fantastic, but in the system and the buildup, I think if Marlon Fossey was available, I think the former Fulham player, he would have, I think, started a game or at least one of these games on that right hand side because I thought he was really strong against New Zealand. I know it's New Zealand, but he looks more Serginho Dest ish, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. And if you're going to build out of three, well then Marlon Fossey, Serginho Dest, Yunus Musa, those type of players would be interesting. I can't figure out Malik Tillman at all.
Yeah.
I think Tillman is fantastic for PSV. I can't figure him out in this US system because I feel like every time he's been given that opportunity to shine, he he's a good enough player, but I don't see like that next jump. Like, is he going to be better if if Gio's healthy, if Eunice is healthy, if Weston is healthy, is Tillman going to play? Haji Wright on that left hand side, he's just a different body. And Berhalter had him as a left winger, like he is a Coventry City, but he came in as a sub and played more as a dual striker because of his tangible size alongside Brandon Vasquez. And then for Josh Sargent, Brandon Vasquez, Ricardo Pepi, Flo Balogun, who wants it? I mean,
Mm.
these we kind of just assumed that Balogun, when he changed and came over from England, it was going to be his role. When Flo's on, what's his stat line right here? I just had it. Flo. It's 5 goals and 17 appearances. He's had some big goals in like tournaments and Nations League. But there's still like there's there's a discrepancy in having Weston and Gio and Timmy and Christian playing around him. Like they still don't have the connectivity and kind of the what's the right way to explain it? Like
It's not clicking. You're not seeing it click.
not as much as I thought it would, if that made
Yeah.
sense. I thought he could run the lines and his technical ability, his hold up play, like what he does at Monaco, what he did in France before the move, before sent on loan from Arsenal. I just thought it would be like, oh, this guy's going to be like 15, 20, 15 goals over the course of a calendar year for US. And it just hasn't hit. So I think there's definitely spots that I think for Mauricio Pochettino, especially because he hired Nico Estevez, who was Greg Berhalter's assistant sorry, let me take that back. He didn't hire him. U.S. Soccer hired Nico Estevez after he was fired from FC Dallas. Nico was Greg Berhalter's assistant at Columbus. He followed him to the national team before he got the FC Dallas job. Nico came through the Valencia. He was coaching at Valencia, so he helped develop Eunice at Valencia. So he's going to be, it feels like more of like the MLS guy for the national team. So it's all going to start to roll downhill. Everything's going to make a lot more sense. But for the first, I would say, debut of a weekend of an international window, I think Mauricio Pochettino, he walks away with checking all the boxes he needed to from a US fan base, from a cynical perspective of those that like, okay, prove to me that you're the right guy. But I already felt like those cynical fans were going to give him the benefit of the doubt anyways.
Yeah, vibe's still good despite the loss.
Good vibes.
Final question on this. I just wanted to ask you a Pulisic question.
Yeah.
Only because, he is in the form of his life right now at Milan.
Absolutely.
He's never played so well. I've said to you a few times, I've seen Pulisic a lot in the flesh. I saw that goal. We did a show maybe the following day when he scored that goal for Chelsea against Liverpool. And I said to you, it's a coming of age kind of moment. Then he got injured maybe 2 games later against Nottingham Forest. He's left Chelsea, he's gone to Milan and blah, blah, blah. This season, the way he's played, if you've not watched the Milan game yet, I'm sure most people watching this and listening to this probably have. But if you haven't, watch them. Watch him. He is just playing so, so well. I wouldn't put him in my top kind of 20 yet. I wouldn't put him in my kind of world-class 11 v world-class 11 kind of conversation. But I do think he is really on a trajectory right now, which you can see. There is a strength, there is a guile, there is a confidence, there's a cockiness, there's a go-to guy-ness of Christian Pulisic, which is super cool to watch at the moment, which had been missing. So he is going to be so important to America, whatever happens moving forward, if fit. But he's not there in the second game. And your point is well made and well taken that, it was, friendly and there's relationships to be had with club managers, which may be important down the line. All absolutely taken as read. But if we're talking optics here, and when we
Yeah.
talk vibes, we're talking optics. Not having Pulisic in Guadalajara, I don't know. That seemed to me like maybe it'll pay dividends later, but it feels like a mistake now. What say you?
Well, I got to be honest, it surprised me. There was no indication that it was going to happen in the build up to the Panama game. I think Mauricio said it afterwards that the other players went home for knocks and that it was something to the effect of he looked tired at
Yeah.
training in the buildup. And that's fully understandable. You know, if the game was on the line, Christian would be there. There's no doubt about it. To your point, I think there were a lot of questions going into the 2022 World Cup. Since the start of the 2022 World Cup, Christian's been outrageous. He's everything as predicted. His form is phenomenal. And the best thing that happened was he got out of the psychotic situation that was Chelsea Football Club, with the managerial turnover, the challenges for positional play, and asking him in the last couple of windows, what's the difference? He's like, I'm playing. He's like, the reason why I'm healthy is because I am playing every single game. He's earned that right through two different managers. And you're right, playing in this kind of number 10 role has been outstanding for him. Um, Now, the nuance to this is with Anthony Robinson pushing up so high on that left hand side, Christian effectively was playing as a dual number 10 with Brendan Aronson. So they were overloading underneath Josh Sargent. That was one thing I forgot to really point out. That was a nuance that Pochettino wanted him to play more centrally in the buildup of possession, because it really unlocked him, similar to what it did the 2022 World Cup. So for Christian, yeah, listen, I heard Lexi, I heard everybody else. I'm not naive to the conversation, everything that's happening over on social. I get it. Having him there, I think, changes the confidence level of the group. If he's on the field, it certainly changes the way the United States plays. He's a different player than Brendan Aronson. All due respect to Brendan Aronson. He's going to be able to do things that Brendan just can't do. And I don't mean that as a slight to Brendan whatsoever. So yeah, I mean, I get it. I really do. My hope is that it pays dividends. Now they're going to play Jamaica in the next international window. It'll be the quarterfinals of the Nations League. They'll have to go down to Jamaica and play that first leg. It's going to be a two-legged affair. They'll be back in St. Louis for the second leg just a few days later. Remember, a calendar year ago, that was the disaster of the red card for Serginho Dest at Trinidad and Tobago in the second leg. They looked confident in the first leg in Austin, winning, I believe it was 2-0. And then it went to hell in a handbasket really fucking quick. Sorry, Tim. When he not only got the red, but he booted the ball to the moon and then MF'd both Tim Ream and Matt Turner on the way back. So dynamics going to look different. Hopefully at that time. And by the way, there's something, I know we'll get into Timmy Tickles in a minute, but for Mauricio Pochettino, this is his first time managing at the international window. So it's going to be this was his first learning curve for he and his staff of how to manage the players. They're going to tweak, their eyes are going to be open, they're going to figure out how to be different. It's going to look different. They'll probably land in somewhere in Florida, train there, pop on the plane, go down to Kingston, play the game, come back, then head up to St. Louis where it's going to be freezing probably in November. And they'll figure it out. But you know, he's also going to, as a manager, and we talked about this, we teased him about it. He now has to be the one calling players as opposed to the one releasing players. And so what does that relationship look like with the clubs? Because he's very rarely going to have a full complement of a roster heading into an international window with all the injuries and concerns and fatigues that he just dealt with during this window.
Or maybe he needs those good vibes as well for further conversations with Milan to come when he actually needs Christian Pulisic. I don't know.
With Zlatan.
Are you getting to go to Jamaica? You're going to be in Kingston?
I don't think so. I think we're going to do it out of what it comes down to is security. I mean, I think the
you're
conversation.
Too famous. You're too much of a celebrity.
Well, it's the truck, it's the equipment and the truck and the workers and everybody that has to. It's not just us on camera.
Sure.
So I think it was something like $100,000. What was going to be, and then still not. It's a world feed, so you're not having control of the cameras. So does it just make sense to take it back to
worth it.
studios? Yeah,
it's a shame.
Studios
it's a shame.
awesome.
I'd love to see you doing this show, maybe in like some sort of speedo, drinking in Kingston. I was going to say pina colada, but that's not right. I don't know what.
I will tell you
I'd love to go.
that at the studios in Atlanta, Turner Studios, I was sitting in Shaq's chair, way
Oh,
too big for me. I
enormous, like
had to.
Game of Thrones chair, and you were
It's
like
so
Joffrey.
big, dude. It's so big. I'm like a little kid in a chair. My feet
Does
can't
he know
touch the
you sat
ground.
in this? Is this
No, no,
allowed?
no, not at all. No, him and Chuck weren't there. But you know who was there? I know you're
Go
not
on.
really a baseball guy, an American baseball guy, but the
Hmm?
playoffs were happening. It was
Oh
the
yeah,
Guardians at the Yankees.
yeah.
So Pedro Martinez was there. Jimmy Rollins was there. Dusty Baker was there. Who else was there? There's somebody else that I'm missing. Anyways, like, so all these guys, like all of, like we're all, there's like two rooms, but we all like hang out in the green room. So the baseball guys were there. We're there. It
Awesome.
was just awesome. Like you
Yeah,
have no
so good.
idea, like the former, like gigantic celebrity sports guys that are going to be in the building when you show up. So it's
Yeah,
always
that's
fun.
cool. It's like I mean they don't speak to me obviously, but I was in Talksport a couple of days ago and I was just getting in the lift and sort of fanning around and on my phone, and I was in with Simon Jordan and Graham Souness, and they're just having a little chat going up to their show. And I know Simon, I don't know Graham, and I was just like, like and then we know,
Yeah.
and it's sort of like, oh, it's pretty cool, isn't it? It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun stuff. It's
Yeah.
quite cool.
Well, when
Um,
you took me to talk sport, the fact that they all turned and like Luca was like
give you a
waving
little
at all of
wave,
them.
yeah.
Martin Keown
Luca
was
was
in there.
waving at Simon, I think,
And
and maybe
Simon was like,
Jim.
"Hey,
Yeah,
what's up?" Yeah. And
this
you're like,
guy,
that's
he's
not his
nice.
personality
No,
on camera.
no, he's nice. He's nice. He's actually quite nice. All right, look, that's enough of that for now. I do want to talk a bit about England because away from the Twitter storm that I had to endure on Wednesday, I do want to get your view on it. But you know, there's a couple of angles here. Number one is Thomas Tuchel as England manager, how that's going to go. The other one is a German being in charge of the English national team. Those are the two interesting angles. And I wanted to start with the German of it all first because you know I feel like I'm annoyed a bit because I don't know if people read like the Daily Mail, which is a paper in the UK. The sports pages tend to be quite good. I wouldn't touch the news page with a barge pole, but the sports generally is pretty decent. And they had this headline which was like England hire a German and put German in like big
Yeah.
capital letters. You know, it's obviously a bit of a that is a little bit xenophobic, I think. Whether it's meant to be kind of subtle or not, I don't know, but it's not something I don't want to be associated with. That is basically my point, and yet I kind of have to a bit. And this is not because there is a German in charge, right? We've had a Swedish manager in the dearly departed Sven-Goran Eriksson. We had Fabio Capello, which didn't go well back in 2010, and so it's not the first time it's happened. It's not notable on that score, and the
You
Premier
also
League,
had a Dutch manager.
and an Irish manager in my fellow Board League Carsley.
Well, the Dutch manager, the freaky
Who was it?
deaky Dutch, Steve McLaren.
How would you say that in his native tongue?
It is how you say football.
There it
No?
is. Goldfinger McLaren there for the kids. So it isn't that, you know, as the main thrust. And the reason I think this is stupid and it's not xenophobic is because and I had in the responses I got, there was one real stupid one that got to me, and it was repeated quite a lot. And it was, oh, so if somebody wants to work for British Gas, they need to be British, do they? And I was like,
Hmm.
well, no, because it's not a requirement of British Gas as a company that everyone who works there is British. Like,
Hmm.
that's not a requirement for you to be able to work there and compete. Whatever competition is for British Gas, I don't know. More customers than Octopus Energy, I don't know. But like, that's not a requirement. So it's an apples and oranges comparison. But when it comes to international football, it is passport v passport. It is identity v identity. And once you have declared for a nation, you know, people sent me the Declan Rice thing in response. Like, once you've declared as a senior men's or women's international, you have to stay with that nation if you have played for them. You can't move to another nation unless your nation you once played for collapses and no longer exists. And there is some kind of leeway there, I
Yeah,
think.
I
But beyond
understand.
that, you have to play for that nation. You've declared for them. And it's just my view that part of the interesting nature of international football is it's our best versus your best, our location v your location, our players who get through in our league v your best players who get through in your league. And if you are a top nation, and by that I mean
Hmm.
someone who can realistically win the World Cup or the European Championship, get to a final, properly compete, have the resources and the population to do so, I feel like you're kind of obliged to
Hmm.
have a manager of that nationality in charge. It's not a rule. You don't have to, but I feel like it should be a rule. Now, with it not being a rule in men's or women's football, you do get some great stories like Serena Wiegmann, who is Dutch, taking charge of the English women and winning the European Championship. And people were screenshotting me saying it was the second best day in the history of English football beyond the World Cup win.
Emma Hayes winning the Olympic gold with the U.S. women's national team.
But, you know,
Yeah.
I do sort of think, and this is why I think you'll be interesting on this, I do think it's slightly different for maybe the US men than the US women because the US women are so good. So that's an interesting point, actually. But like, you know, in the end, I'm open to it if there is no sort of pathway, development, there's not the resource. It would be a good thing for the nation to have because you've not had a great deal of sort of experience in football and that can be brought back to the country. I think that's a great part of it. But that's not the case with England or Italy or Spain or Germany, the major nations of European football. It's not the same for Brazil and Argentina. You know, Lionel Scaloni is not the best coach they could afford. He was the best Argentinian they could get, right? And no person who's not of that nationality, I don't believe, I'm here to be corrected, has won the World Cup with their nation because it is part of it. And so for England to do it, what it says to me is there is no pathway for English people to get top jobs and thereby the top international job. And like, I speak to coaches all the time who want to be managers. I speak to managers. I know managers. And they will always not complain, but they will say, well, I'm never going to be Man United manager. So the ceiling is the ceiling. And there are so many issues with that. And I just think we're at a path now where there's never going to be an English manager in charge of the national team unless it's happenstance or failure. Like Southgate became the England manager by default because Allardyce had that pint of wine in Dubai or whatever it was. And it worked out better than anyone possibly could have expected. And we've always had this, the under-21 manager is going to become the England manager. It was meant to be Peter Taylor. It was meant to be David Platt. It never happened. It never happened because these guys had never been tested at a serious level. And Southgate would never have happened. But for the Allardyce sort of debacle, you know, we're all glad it did. They've had all that time to work on it. And the pathway isn't going to be become Brighton manager, West Ham manager, Wolves manager, and then become England manager. They've, I'm sure, spoken to Graham Potter and one or two others, and they've dismissed it. They don't want it. What they need to do, England managers, and the pathway that needs to be created is the Football Association need to actively encourage their managers not to be in charge of Burnley, but be in charge of Bologna. They need to go to Stuttgart. They need to go to, I don't know, I've made my point. I can't list clubs forever. That
no, I get you. Yeah.
Second tier in Spain and Germany and Italy, because once you're on that pathway, you know, Thomas Tuchel, he became Borussia Dortmund manager. If it was equivalent in England, he would never get the job to be a Borussia Dortmund manager in England. And that'd be sort of, I don't know, probably would be Chelsea, I guess. But if he came through that pathway, he got Chelsea because he was at Dortmund. They provide the pathway. We do not. English coaches need to do what American footballers do. And by that, I mean soccer players. You get my point. They go to Germany. They go to Italy. They go to other countries. They develop, they get better, and they bring that back to America to play.
Well, they're valued more. Yeah, they become valued more. 100%. 100%. Well, and I think the nuance of the conversation is pretty interesting in that why hasn't Thomas Tuchel been the manager of Germany? I mean, what for Mauricio Pochettino not being the manager of Argentina? There's nuance to the conversation. I understand structurally what you're saying, and what's even more interesting, and I mean, it's not apples to oranges here. It's apples to apples with the conversation of, okay, who's the right coach for the U.S. men's national team? If you were to just keep it as the idea of being an American, I think what's interesting in this is that we're going to say that this is an FA problem or this is a U.S. soccer problem, but the development of coaches and innately the development of coaches is happening. But the valuation of coaches is being looked at differently because when it comes to the top job, the glass ceiling is the glass ceiling of perception. It's not of talent level. For example, if the Panamanian game doesn't happen and Tim Way doesn't get caught throwing a little chicken wing, Greg Berhalter is the coach of the U.S. men's national team right now. It's not Mauricio Pochettino. So those monumental moments are little gray areas that start to happen. Now, it's obviously different in England, right? Because Gareth Southgate goes through 8 years. He becomes extremely close while not valued at all in the bit. He's valued, but he's not looked at as an elite manager, right? Because this idea of elite managers aren't national team managers. The idea of elite managers are domestic managers. For example, a Hansi Flick. Right? Hansi Flick was an assistant coach that becomes a head coach, that becomes a national team coach. That's then no longer the national team coach, but still is an elite manager now because he's a Barcelona coach. What happens to Scratch and Sniff?
Yogi. Where is Yogi? I don't know.
Let's for Didier Deschamps. I mean, Didier Deschamps is like the lifetime French national team coach. But how would he be valued as a domestic coach? Zinedine Zidane. If he got a national team, would he get he would be a guy I'd want to talk to if I was a national team if I was
Yeah.
in charge of a national team to see who could be my next manager. To your point, listen, as long as I can remember being an American, the conversation about England national team head coaches, I'm old enough to remember, um, gosh, not too long ago, we were talking about Eddie Howe's and we were talking about Sean Dyches. Um, who else were we talking about in this conversation?
Graham Potter.
Obviously,
Yeah.
Graham Potter, the path less traveled. Graham Potter is a perfect example
Yeah.
of a
He should,
guy
I
that
mean, he
should
should
go
have got
out
the job.
and
This
become
was
an
his
England.
time.
So, but he is frowned upon because of what happened at Chelsea. If
Mm,
Graham Potter would have stayed at Brighton, I
mm.
think Graham Potter probably would have been England national team manager based on the trajectory of what was happening in the previous 3 years. Oh my gosh, I'm going blank and I can see his face and I can't remember his name. He was at Crystal Palace, Charlton manager, does the shoulder bob.
Alan Pardew.
Alan
Hearts.
Pardew, he
Yeah.
was supposed to be the manager going all the way back to the, say 8 years ago. He was like the next guy that should have been English manager. So I don't think you have a structural problem. I think you have a perception problem
Mm.
because the perception problem is this is just an American looking at it that England managers are good enough to be English Premier League managers, but not top six managers.
Yeah. How do you change that, Danny? I mean, what about going abroad and actually being successful? I mean, in the uh, you know,
100%.
in the time
Isn't that
where
Roy
coaches are
Hodgson?
getting their license, well, I mean, that's a great point. I think no one has really
Shouldn't,
done
shouldn't,
that since. Why
yeah.
is there's no
Sir Bobby
reason
Robson?
why Italian managers are better than English managers. There is no reason why they have more potential, but for whatever reason, when a job comes up, that everyone's like, "Oh, who's in charge of Bologna?"
Hmm.
And you think, I mean, that's fair. But
Yeah.
I just think that there's got to be a pathway to make it happen for these guys. And if it is going abroad, please do it. Because what about the embarrassment element of it? What about the fact there's a failure element? I sort of feel that way. And it's not xenophobia. I think that's so fucking stupid. Sorry, Tim, when people have thrown that at me. Maybe it's true of Nigel Farage, but he's a fucking sorry, Tim. Sorry, Tim. So it obviously is. But it's not for me because I want him to do well when I get why they've done it. And it's not the rule, but it should be, shouldn't it? I mean, why isn't it the rule for England? People in Italy, the Italian people I know, the Spanish people I know, they think this is quite funny because they would never do this.
Hmm. I mean, I just want the best manager. For me, this is just me. I just want the best manager. And maybe that's because growing up in Southern California, growing up in the United States, we're so multicultural. I mean, thinking about my coaches growing up as a kid, I had American, I had Dutch, I had Honduran, I had Italian, I had English, I had Iranian. Let's see, going into high school, I had Italian again,
But
college
that's
Italian.
fantastic, though. That's
No,
fantastic for
but
that
here's the
level,
best
isn't
part.
it? What a
So
great
then when I turned
experience.
pro, so then I had an American for the under 20s, Clive Charles for the 23s. Hoffy was my under 20s, 23s. I got to pro. Let's see, it was Thomas Rongen, Dutch. It was Walter Zenga, Italian. It was uh, Fernando Clavijo, which was Uruguayan American. I had Ray Hudson, who was English. Greg Andrulis was American. Colin Clark, which was Northern Ireland, an American in Salt Lake, an American in LA Galaxy, and then that was the end of my career. So, what for me personally,
Hmm.
like I had everybody. So just to hear one voice, one like cultural experience, I had everybody else, but that was domestic. So I mean, the best coach I ever had was Clive Charles. He was an Englishman, my Olympic team coach, hands down, best coach I ever had. To this day, I put him up against anybody. So I wasn't of that, but I understand if we are going to talk about from a specific FA's perspective of how we make better coaches, I think as much as you give them kind of the education component, the book smart component, well, then it's up to them to go.
Hmm.
Like for as much as let's use Jesse Marsh as an example. I think Jesse Marsh is on an incredible career path. Whether that's success or failure, absolutely overachieving or absolutely underachieving, who cares? I mean, like to see him come through, retire, become an assistant, get a head coaching job in Montreal, fail, pull back, then get the job at New York Red Bulls. And while he's at Red Bulls, go get his UEFA coaching badges, leave halfway through the season to become an assistant in Germany, then get an Austrian job, then come back to Germany and fail, then go to the Premier League and fail, and then become the Canadian national team head coach and succeed. I like teach their own. Those life choices are incredible. Like
Mm,
get on the train, get off the train, but still be on the train to explore life. So
yeah.
the only criticism I have, this is my view of the whole Thomas Tuchel, Timmy Tickles hiring. Number one, why wait till January? Number
Yes,
two,
that's weird.
would we still be, if it was Jurgen Klopp, would we be having this pushback? I feel like this is more of a Thomas Tuchel situation. It's
Do you
like,
think?
okay, no, my humble opinion is that what happened at Borussia Dortmund at the end, what happened at PSG at the end, what happened at Chelsea at the end, what happened at Bayern Munich at the end, I feel as though there's more of like Tuchel, like great coach, no problem. But like, are we like forgetting what happened behind the scenes? Like the havoc that seems to be around. Not the manager's incredible. He's going to win things. He's won Champions League. He's won leagues. He's incredible. But is there a
Mm,
certain amount of havoc that comes along with that? Because if I think he would have said, "This is just me," I think if England FA could have convinced Jurgen Klopp to be the manager, I don't think there'd be anything close to the pushback that's
mm.
happening around Thomas Tuchel right now.
Only from me, probably.
True.
The only question I have left then is I wanted to get your view on this. If Thomas Tuchel was manager of England during the European Championship, would they have won that tournament?
I think with his experience in all the different formats of tournaments domestically that he had, I could absolutely seeing him win that tournament. It's just different. And
Yeah.
no disrespect to Gareth Southgate. And there's nuance to the conversation, right? Because it's not a black or white conversation, right? It's not as clear cut. It's a gray conversation. Um, he has the experience that I think that Gareth Southgate didn't have as a domestic footballer or just domestic footballing manager that would give, I think it gives him an advantage. I'm not trying to fence post this. I'm
Mm,
saying yes, but I think because of the experiences as a domestic manager at a really high level with multiple clubs, that gives him an acumen that's a little bit different, that is a little bit
mm,
more positive. Um, so I'm intrigued to see because here's the other part, the adaptation period. Same with Pochettino, same as what we talked about. It's going to be shorter. It's going to be tighter. Now he's not coaching international players. He's coaching international players that are English. So
mm,
how does he now get the best out of an exquisite group of world-class players, but need a little bit more? And maybe this is what's going to happen. Similar to what we saw with Pochettino, when the players show up a little bit tighter, a little bit more like, because I think what I notice is it's not just the performance, it's more like the psychological, like
yeah.
zoning in. It's not going to be as easy. It's not going to be as, the vibes are going to be different. And when Thomas Tuchel and his group start needling in and start digging to see how they can get the best out of them, how do these guys react? Let's use Ben White for a perfect example. Is Ben White
Mm.
in the mix now? Or is there another Ben White that maybe doesn't get along a Ben White type of situation where a player's like, I'm not dealing with this. Like, I don't,
Mm.
I don't want to play for this guy. Like this guy, like how do you get the best? How are the relationships? Because guys aren't going to want to lose out on an opportunity to go to a World Cup. Um, yeah, I'm intrigued by this. I'm intrigued to see how he manages at an international level.
I mean, the one thing everyone can agree on is it's a bold move for
Yeah,
everybody
for
involved.
sure.
It is bold from the FA, it's bold from Thomas Tuchel, and whether it gives them more a chance of winning the World Cup coming up, I don't think it does. I think it probably would in a European Championship, but we'll never know. The good news is Gareth Southgate is going to be Man United manager soon, and then he'll get that
No.
experience of being a Premier League manager again.
How
And when
did
he
he
comes back
survive
to
the window?
England,
How did he survive the
I don't know.
window?
I can't.
Hey,
We can't. Don't do
boys
it.
and girls, work on your PowerPoints.
Step one, sack Alex Ferguson. Step two, give me new contract. Anyway, we'll hold it. We'll hold it. That's all coming back this weekend. Danny, always a pleasure. Thank you very much
Yeah.
indeed. That's Brian Dunseth over there, top broadcaster. And we look forward to seeing him in his trainers and a suit on television again very, very soon. I've been Tom Rennie, second tier broadcaster. Tim Horsey produced the program. It's Week in the Tackle. We'll see you next time.